The fearful avoidant in relationships doesn't actually keep changing their mind. It's that their nervous system flips between craving closeness and then fearing it. And by understanding these particular things, in fact, 5 major things we're going to cover here today, you will have so much greater insight into yourself as a fearful avoidant and the healing that can be done. Or if you're the loved one of a fearful avoidant, you'll start to really learn what's going on inside of this person's mind so that it can give you context and clarity in how to respond. So here's the first thing you need to know if you did not already know this. And it's the fact that everything we do as human beings is largely built on the foundation of our conditioning. Our conditioning is actually driving our behaviors. So if you learned in childhood, like a fearful avoidant does, that love is something that is both wonderful and connecting, but also scary and terrifying, and you haven't figured out how to reconcile those things in your mind because you actually had polar opposite experiences frequently all the time throughout your childhood, where sometimes love was something so kind and you felt really connected to your parents or family members, and other times maybe your parents or family members struggled with their own mental health issues, or they were fighting all the time in really scary or frightening ways to you growing up, or you had a parent who was an alcoholic or addict. If you see these polar opposite experiences where one day everything's great and lovely and other days things are really scary and unpredictable, then that literally becomes your conditioned view about love and connection. So the moment that you end up feeling like you are vulnerable to somebody as an adult, that vulnerability trigger kicks in and you go, oh, what do I know about vulnerability? And your subconscious mind, which is basically a giant warehouse of all of the information that you've stored in your life. It literally stores everything. It consolidates memories a little bit over time, but literally your subconscious is storing everything. You can imagine that your conscious mind goes to your subconscious and it says, what do we know about vulnerability? And it opens this filing cabinet and all of this information comes forth and says, well, vulnerability can be really good. We can have really good days and we can have really scary, horrifying experiences, and we're ultimately going to get really hurt. And so what happens is even if a fearful avoidant really loves somebody, really falls in love, the more they love, the scarier it is. And so the more they're vulnerable, the more they become frightened in that process. And so this is why you see this push-pull cycle, because this part of them that wants that love and connection will move into pursuit and closeness and actually making bids for connection and trying to drive the relationship forward. But then as soon as there's any little tiny theme or pattern that's out of alignment or any tiny incongruency or really just any sort of painful thing, I've seen fearful avoidants who say, yeah, my really good friend and their partner broke up today and it just reminds me why relationships never last and I'm just going to get hurt too. Like it can be something that is not even happening in the relationship with this person that triggers them to go into a bit of a tailspin and then assume that all things end in pain and suffering when it comes to relationships, and then they feel the need to pull away and protect themselves. So irrespective of what's happening in a relationship with somebody, the fearful avoidant is very likely to sort of pinball back and forth between wanting that closeness and feeling very afraid of it, which then causes them to have these behaviors externally that are very intermittently reinforcing and make other people's heads spin, but it's also because they're suffering first within themselves. The second really big thing to understand about the fearful avoidant and their roller coaster is that ultimately fearful avoidance, and this is something that's just like so important to recognize, fearful avoidance usually didn't see a representation of love that was modeled without a power struggle attached. So what I mean by this is that in truly healthy, secure relationships, there's literally no power struggle. There's no interest in one person having the upper hand in a relationship. Truly secure relationships are about both people deeply knowing each other, deeply supporting each other, and about mutual reciprocity of vulnerability, acceptance, support. And that's what securely attached people do really well. A lot of people don't get healthy modeling for that growing up. A lot of people instead, we get dynamics of seeing, relationships being about who has the upper hand. One person's kind of winning the power battle over the other person. And what that actually means is that both people are operating from confusion and fear because they haven't had their own healthy modeling for relationships either. And so they're carrying these wounds into their own relational dynamics. But if you grew up in a household where that's what you see, where it's always a power struggle, then that's your conditioning. You literally get conditioned to think, okay, love and relationships are a power struggle. And so I better be the person with the upper hand so I'm not the one suffering. That is a very common theme for a lot of people who are fearful avoidants. And so when they love, and it's hard because fearful avoidants are generally extremely empathetic, extremely caring, extremely deep people. They usually care very much about other people quite naturally. And yet it's painful for them because you end up, if you're a fearful avoidant, caring so deeply about somebody, but then feeling like they're really going to hurt me. And now it feels so unnatural, but I have to try to make sure I have the upper hand. And I don't want to have to worry about who has the upper hand, but it feels like survival. And so there's this deep inner conflict for fearful avoidance where they only think relationships are a power struggle. It's an unknown that something could exist outside of that in a close romantic relationship. So then you fall in love with somebody, you want to be there for them, you want to deeply connect with them. But then as soon as you feel really vulnerable to them, you enter into, okay, I better move into the power struggle mode and make sure I kind of have the upper hand to not get hurt. And that is a very tragic thing to experience because the moment you're living from that, you step outside of your authenticity, you step outside of what I think to be a deeper knowing that relationships shouldn't be like that. I think that deep down, fearful avoidants know that no, there is a better way. I just don't know what that looks like quite yet. And that's where healing and really doing the work to become securely attached changes everything, because literally the way out of that is vulnerability, is acceptance. And that really brings me to point number 3, which is that fearful avoidants are great in this sort of roller coaster. They're great at helping other people be vulnerable, but they generally have no idea how to do it themselves. So, a lot of times fearful avoidants are amazing, at drawing out information from others, at getting to know you deep, deep down, what makes you tick, what lights you up, what your fears are, what your concerns are. And they're really good at trying to be there for those things. But fearful avoidants usually had a lot of negative reinforcement when it comes to their own vulnerability. So maybe as a kid, if you cried, you were shamed, or maybe there just wasn't room for your own emotions because there was so much emotion going on around you that there was no container for you to take up space. Or maybe you grew up in a household where you were so busy walking on eggshells in an unpredictable environment that you just didn't even get to think of vulnerability. You had to shut that part of yourself off really early on. And vulnerability is arguably one of the single most important ingredients, period, to navigating a healthy relationship. You literally cannot have a healthy long-term relationship without the ability to be vulnerable to another person, the ability to let somebody in and say, hey, I don't like when that happens. It kind of hurts me. Or, hey, can you be mindful? This is something that's really important to me in a relationship. Can we work on it? If you can't have vulnerable conversations that share your fears, your feelings, and your needs, then you are stuck operating in a dynamic in relationships where there's just an invisible wall constantly between yourself and somebody else, or a series of invisible walls. And then we're left to our own devices of mind reading, trying to guess what each other's fears and needs and desires are. And that makes things really hard. And fearful avoidance, and this brings me to number 4, which kind of leapfrogs off of number 3, will constantly feel like they are in one-way relationships. They will constantly feel like they are giving more than they are receiving in relationships because they don't know how to tell people what they actually need. And unfortunately, fearful avoidant, because you are so good at being hypervigilant, I often joke with fearful avoidance that you're the human lie detectors because you notice every little shift and change in a pattern and you read between the lines so profoundly, deeply in the process. You almost have this deep sixth sense for things. Because of that, you assume, because we all tend to do this, we tend to project from our perception. So if you're great at that, you assume that everybody else would be as attuned as you are, as hypervigilant as you are, but actually every other attachment style is not. Anxious attachment styles have a degree of hypervigilance around perceived abandonment, but that's pretty much it, and not around every single little thing, whereas fearful avoidants notice the moment anything is off. That makes you somebody who will be really good at being there for other people, noticing when somebody's off, lending a hand to somebody pretty quickly because you're picking up on it, and then you'll feel alone and isolated that people aren't doing that for you because people aren't noticing as much about you, and also you're probably really good at hiding it. Before we even get to number 5, this is a call for you to learn to let people in, to learn to ask for support, to learn to ask for help, to learn to communicate your needs, because when you do, you'll actually be really pleasantly surprised at how much people do try to show up and be there for you, but you usually have no or very little prior experience or history of seeing that because you haven't become vulnerable yet enough to receive that. And so letting people know early what you feel, what you need, letting people, and by the way, I want to say this too, fearful avoidants are really good at being vulnerable about things they don't actually feel vulnerable about. So you might share your childhood experiences because they feel like they're distant to you, but you probably aren't sharing the struggles you're going through right now, because that's what actually feels vulnerable to talk about. So please note the difference, because sometimes you'll think that, oh yeah, but I've opened up about my past, and so that's fine. Yeah, but are you opening up about the things that are currently vulnerable to you in this moment, in this day and age of your life? that's a different story. Now I will get to number 5, but I just want to say if you want to do a really in-depth amount of healing on your attachment style, I have courses that help you literally leverage neuroscience to rewire your subconscious mind. Your subconscious mind is a warehouse of your conditioning. If you don't target the subconscious mind and actually rewiring your neural pathways in the process of healing, you will always just be intellectualizing. You'll just understand stuff and you won't actually move the needle to see change. So all of our courses are designed to literally help you rewire, because that is the most important ingredient for true healing that also lasts. And if you want to dive deep into that for the Fearful Avoidant, we have a course you can check out fully for free for 7 days. And with that comes a bonus course for life as a gift, a giveaway. We've never done this before for this course, all about codependency and enmeshment and actually healing it, which is also really important for fearful avoidance. It goes hand in hand with a lot of what we're talking about here, because fearful avoidants are just great emotional overfunctioners. The vast majority of the time, it will help you end those patterns and again, rewire them, leveraging neuroplasticity. So you can check those both out for free, one for a limited time, one you get to keep for life, using the link below. And number 5, one of the biggest things that really contribute to the fearful avoidance emotional roller coaster is the fact that they really struggle to set boundaries. Okay. I want to say this. You may think, no, I'm good at setting boundaries. Yeah. But if you set boundaries only from anger or almost exclusively at the point where you're really angry or frustrated about something, it actually means you suck at setting boundaries. Because if you had to wait to the point of getting angry, a lot of things had to go wrong first, and people don't hear you when you're angry. I promise you, people don't hear you nearly as much when you're angry as if you just spoke to somebody directly. People, when you're angry, they hear that you're angry at them. They hear that they're being criticized. They go on the defense and they hear that, oh my gosh, we're in an argument. They don't hear what you need or what you're trying to say. And there's this saying, behind every criticism is actually a need. But if we say, you don't care about me, you're not spending enough time with me, instead of saying, hey, I'm feeling disconnected. I want us to spend more quality time together. Can we plan a fun date night this weekend? Can we make more of an effort for that in the relationship? Yes, it's vulnerable. Yes, you have to have a lot of humility to speak like that, but that is literally the ticket, the golden ticket to healthy, successful, secure, functioning relationships long-term. And until we learn that, we'll always stay stuck. So I hope this was helpful for you today. 5 major themes that will help you understand the fearful avoidant emotional roller coaster. And if you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. I put videos out here every single day to help support you in your relationship journey and your personal healing. And I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks for watching.